Nancy was 40 years old when she decided to bet her last $100 on Bitcoin. Today, she is a millionaire. But what she did was not luck. It was a strategy that anyone can replicate. And in the next few minutes, I will reveal exactly how Nancy transformed a ridiculous amount into a fortune that changed her life forever. If you have doubts whether there is still time to get rich with cryptocurrencies, this story will open your eyes. It was 2017, and Nancy was sitting at the kitchen table of her rented apartment in Chicago, looking at the bank statement that showed only $347 in her account. At 40 years old, she had been working as an administrative assistant for more than a decade, earning little more than $35,000 a year. Her dreams of owning a home seemed increasingly distant, and retirement was an almost fictional concept. Nancy had always been a practical woman. She grew up in a lower middle-class family where every penny mattered, where investing meant a savings account that yielded almost nothing. She had never bought a stock in her life, never thought about investments beyond a basic retirement fund that barely grew. But that November night, while browsing YouTube looking for recipe videos to save money on dinner, something changed. An advertisement caught her attention. Bitcoin, the digital revolution that is creating millionaires. Nancy would normally skip this type of content, but something in the presenter's confident voice made her pause. For 2 hours, she watched video after video about Bitcoin, stories of ordinary people who had transformed small investments into fortunes. At first, Nancy thought it was all a scheme, false advertising. But the more she researched, the more she discovered that Bitcoin was not just real. It was revolutionary technology that was rewriting the rules of money. What impressed Nancy most were not the astronomical numbers, but the human stories. People like her, ordinary workers who had made a brave decision and changed their lives. She read about a teacher who bought Bitcoin with lunch money and paid for his children's college, about a nurse who invested $200 and bought a house 2 years later. For weeks, Nancy dove into the world of cryptocurrencies. She learned about blockchain, about digital scarcity, about how Bitcoin was different from any traditional investment. She discovered that she did not need to understand all the complex technology, she just needed to understand the potential. But understanding was one thing, acting was something completely different. Nancy had only $100 that she could risk without compromising her basic bills. $100 that represented a week of grocery shopping, or 2 trips to the movies, or a special dinner that she rarely allowed herself. The decision to invest those $100 in something so volatile and misunderstood seemed like madness. Her older sister Sarah was the first to try to dissuade her. "Nancy, this is money thrown away. Bitcoin is a bubble, a passing fad. You are going to lose everything." Her co-workers laughed when she mentioned cryptocurrencies. "That is hacker and criminal stuff," they said. "Normal people like us do not mess with that." But Nancy had learned something important in her 40 years. The biggest opportunities always seemed crazy to those on the outside. In December 2017, with trembling hands, Nancy created her first account on a cryptocurrency exchange. The process was more complicated than she expected. Identity verification, security setup, digital wallets. Several times she almost gave up, frustrated with the technical complexity. But she persisted, and on a cold December morning, Nancy bought her first fraction of Bitcoin for exactly $100. At that moment, Bitcoin was quoted at about $19,000, so she got approximately 0.005 Bitcoin. In the first days, Nancy checked the price obsessively. Every hour, every cell phone notification. Bitcoin went up and down wildly, and with it, Nancy's stomach. Within weeks, her $100 became $80, then $60, then $45. January 2018 was brutal. The cryptocurrency market plummeted, and Nancy watched her small investment melt away. Her $100 was now worth only $35. Sarah called to say, "I told you so," and Nancy began to question her decision. But it was exactly at this moment of despair that Nancy made the decision that would change her life forever. Instead of selling at a loss, she decided to study more. She discovered that the falls were part of Bitcoin's cycles, that the technology continued to evolve, that large companies were beginning to adopt cryptocurrencies. Nancy realized that she had not just bought an asset, she had bought a piece of the future. And then she did something that few have the courage to do. During the fall, she bought more. Every month, Nancy set aside $50 from her tight salary. She cancelled her cable TV subscription, stopped eating out, sold clothes she did not wear. Every saving, no matter how small, became more Bitcoin. She had discovered a strategy that experts call dollar-cost averaging, buying regularly regardless of price. While others sold in panic, Nancy bought. While others doubted, Nancy studied. She joined online communities, learned about other promising cryptocurrencies, diversified her portfolio with Ethereum and some carefully selected altcoins. 2019 was a year of patience. The market recovered slowly, and Nancy continued her disciplined strategy. Her colleagues stopped asking about Bitcoin, assuming she had lost everything. But Nancy knew something they did not know. She was building wealth silently. In 2020, when the pandemic shook the world, something extraordinary happened. Governments printed trillions of dollars, and investors began looking for assets that could not be devalued by inflation. Bitcoin, with its limited supply of 21 million coins, became the perfect refuge. Nancy watched fascinated as large companies like Tesla and MicroStrategy bought Bitcoin. Traditional banks that had previously criticized cryptocurrencies now offered related services. What she had seen as a risky bet was becoming mainstream. Nancy's portfolio, which had grown to about $2,500 through her consistent monthly purchases, began to explode. $5,000, $10,000, $25,000. Each day brought numbers she could barely believe. But the real test came in 2021, during the biggest bull market in cryptocurrency history. Nancy saw her portfolio reach $100,000, then $200,000, then $500,000. The temptation to sell was enormous. After all, $500,000 was more money than she had ever dreamed of having in her life. But Nancy had learned to think long-term. She sold only a small part to pay off her debts and create an emergency fund. The rest she kept, knowing that she was participating in a technological revolution that was just beginning. When Bitcoin reached its historic peak of almost $70,000, Nancy's portfolio was worth more than $1.2 million. A woman who had started with $100 and an administrative assistant's salary had become a millionaire. But Nancy's true transformation was not just financial. She had discovered a passion for technology and finance that she never knew she had. She began studying programming, understood economic concepts that had previously seemed impossible, developed a self-confidence that transcended money. Nancy learned that the secret was not in perfect timing or extraordinary luck. The secret was in three simple principles: constant education, unwavering discipline, and long-term vision. She discovered that anyone, regardless of age or financial situation, can participate in this revolution. Today, at 45 years old, Nancy no longer works as an administrative assistant. She became a financial educator, helping other people understand the world of cryptocurrencies. She bought her own house, created a retirement fund that will keep her comfortable for the rest of her life, and still maintains most of her portfolio in cryptocurrencies. The most important lesson Nancy learned: that the biggest risk is not investing in something new and volatile. The biggest risk is doing nothing and letting inflation and stagnation slowly consume your purchasing power. Nancy always says that if she, a 40-year-old woman with no investment experience, managed to transform $100 into more than $1 million, anyone can do the same. Technology continues to evolve, new opportunities arise every day, and we are still in the first chapters of this digital revolution. Nancy's story teaches us that wealth is not the privilege of those born with a silver spoon or who have degrees from expensive universities. Wealth is the result of courage to act, discipline to persist, and wisdom to learn continuously. And in the world of cryptocurrencies, these opportunities are available to all of us, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If Nancy's story touched you, if you recognize in yourself the potential for this transformation, then you are ready to begin your own journey. Because the future belongs to those who have the courage to embrace it, and that future is being built now, one transaction at a time, one brave decision at a time.